Since the Nats won in New York on both Saturday and Sunday to decrease the Mets' playoff chances, Walters will treat everyone to their first beer at the Nats Chat podcast party on Friday night, October 10th at 7 p.m. Walters is located just across the street from the ballpark.
The pitch swung on and Wood skies this one to center field. Harris going back again, way back, looking up, going, and gone. Goodbye. Right into the waterfall over the center field fence. Bang! Zoom goes James Wood. He reaches the 30 home run plateau, his 92nd run batted into the year. With home runs and consecutive at-bats, a multi-homer game for James Wood, and increases the Nationals' lead back to 3 here in the top of the 8th with 1 out. It's now Washington 4 and Atlanta 1.
And welcome to Nats Chat, along with MASNsports.com Nationals insider Mark Zuckerman. I'm Al Galdi, host of the Al Galdi podcast. Wednesday, September 24th, 2025. Might we look back on that day as a truly special day in Nationals history? It was a day on which James Wood hit 2 home runs in a 4-3 Nats win at the Atlanta Braves, ending their 10-game winning streak. And this was the day on which we had the breaking news via multiple reports that the Lerner ownership group has decided on Boston Red Sox senior vice president, assistant general manager Paul Toboni as the Nats head of baseball operations. It is good to have you with us. This is the only Washington Nationals podcast for which there is an episode for the day after every regular season Nats game day. We started in 2021. We are concluding our 5th season. We are excited to say that we will be back for a 6th season. And we, on this installment of the podcast, have a lot to discuss. This installment of Nats Chat brought to us by Mason Kalfas, the top legal recruiter in Washington, D.C. Mason has been with us since our first season. You can reach him at 202-486-3535. You can find us on X at Nats_chat. You can find us on Blue Sky at Nats Chat Podcast. You can email us, natschatpodcast@gmail.com. We have a website you could check out too, natschatpodcast.com, at which you can purchase a t-shirt for this podcast. And we appreciate the support very much. We will get to the Nats win at the Braves, but the hiring of Paul Toboni clearly is what matters most. The news was broken by ESPN MLB insider Jeff Passan, who wrote the following on X, quote, breaking, the Washington Nationals are finalizing a deal to name Paul Toboni their new head of baseball operations. Sources tell ESPN Toboni, 35, rose rapidly to become assistant GM for the Boston Red Sox and is widely regarded as one of the best young executives in MLB, end quote. There, over the last few weeks, were a good number of reports on candidates to run Nats baseball operations. Paul Toboni had not come up, but he ends up getting the job. He is a guy who has worked his way up the Red Sox hierarchy. Going to be very interesting to see and hear what Toboni says at his introductory press conference, whenever that is. Going to be very interesting to see if the Nats retain interim general manager Mike DeBartolo in some way. There is a lot to figure out here. But Mark, Paul Toboni, what do we know? What do you think?
Well, I think what's important here, Al, is to say we know a few things. And the most important thing is here that the Lerners have made their decision. They have hired him to be in charge of baseball operations. That much we know. And we know that the deal, at least as of last check a little while ago this afternoon here on Wednesday, it was not a finalized deal. It was they've chosen him to be the guy. He's aware that he's been chosen to be the guy. But the actual contract hasn't been signed yet, and they're still finalizing details. And I say that only because we know going back a ways, when it came to Bud Black being told he was going to be the manager of the team, then ultimately not becoming manager of the team, that there's still always that little sliver of, until something is signed, we don't know for a fact. I don't have any reason to believe something like that's going to happen. But what we don't know is this. What is his title? Is he general manager? Is he president of baseball operations? Is he both? Is he going to have a GM working underneath him or not? Is Mike DeBartolo potentially going to be that person, or could it be someone else? What are the terms of the deal? There's a lot there that we don't know yet, and I think they are still working through a lot of that. I'm not sure that's just a case of it not having gotten out yet, but that they are still figuring a lot of those things out. I think this is still very fresh There's no official announcement coming later today, is my understanding, and it may not be for a few days. I wouldn't be surprised. The timing would make sense if they do the official announcement and press conference on Monday, the day after the season, and that kicks off the offseason, et cetera. So there is a lot still to sort through. But I think what's most important here is he is going to be the guy, whether he's GM, president of baseball operations, combination of the two, or some other title they come up with, he's going to be the guy in charge of the whole department. And you mentioned that his name hadn't really come up. It had come up as a candidate, but it was kind of shot down, or he was sort of shot down as one of the legitimate contenders for it a week or two ago, I want to say, because it sounds like Boston, with Craig Breslow as their chief baseball officer, was going to be naming somebody as their GM, the number 2 in command GM, and that Toboni was a top candidate for that. And the thought was that he may want that job instead. So I think that ties in interestingly enough here. Once we know what is the title in DC, does that explain why he didn't want to be number 2 in Boston, even with a GM title, as opposed to being number 1 in DC, depending on what his title is? Maybe more control, obviously, as the guy making the call. So I think that's one of the most important things still to find out about it. As you said in that Passan report, an up-and-coming guy, well-regarded throughout the sport, 35 years old. And I think what's also interesting is he's got both a scouting and an analytics background. MBA from Notre Dame. Okay, that's the new age kind of GM. But he played baseball at Cal Berkeley and worked his way up over the course of a decade with the Red Sox through their scouting and player development. Originally an intern, then an area scout, then a VP of scouting, then the last couple of years as vice president and assistant GM. And he ran their draft room for 3 years. And the last couple of years in his most recent job had more oversight over the whole organization. So it's not necessarily one of those, it's not either or. It's not, well, this guy's just got the scouting background or he's the new wave analytics. It does seem like he comes from both sides of the equation, which would, to me, be a pretty appealing thing to have. And then the final point being somebody who comes spending for the last decade with a winning organization, not always winning, but they do win a lot in Boston. They've won a World Series during his time there, and a pretty good track record for scouting and player development, which we know has got to be a priority around here. So if they were going to go outside, I think a lot of people should be encouraged by the idea of getting somebody who has worked for a good organization, a big market organization that operates things a certain way. And now, what is he able to do? What is he allowed to do? How will he do running his own franchise in Washington?
Yeah, and that is the biggest question of all. Will the Lerner family, with Paul Toboni running baseball operations, spend more on infrastructure and spend more on players, or are the Nats going to still be run on the cheap? Now, just thinking about this logically, if you are Paul Toboni and you are a bright, rising young executive, presumably making a very good living working for the Boston Red Sox, why would you take the job of running Nationals baseball operations if you don't get assurances from ownership that it is going to spend properly on infrastructure and players? And so, without knowing what Paul Toboni has been told, just thinking about this logically, you would think that he has been given some assurances here that he likes what he has heard when it comes to how ownership is going to be behaving moving forward. Because let's make this clear. It doesn't matter who the Nats hire. They could hire Branch Rickey. If ownership doesn't behave in a different way in terms of spending, and again, it's not just players, it's infrastructure, then there's no hope here, okay? Ownership has got to step up. And if that's going to happen, that is very encouraging. And that a guy like Toboni is taking this job would seem to suggest that he has been given these assurances. And by the way, from Toboni's perspective, and I would think he has an agent, I would make it a point to put in my contract things regarding spending from ownership. And there are ways to do that where it is in your contract that, X amount of dollars are spent on infrastructure, or you get X amount in terms of a budget to spend on staffing, that kind of a thing. I don't know that you can demand from ownership to have like a minimum threshold for a payroll. That's probably extreme. But when it comes to spending on staffing, I think that is something you could get put in your contract in some way. And if I'm Toboni, that's what I'm doing. I think you have to do that, knowing what is out there about this ownership. But that aside, just thinking about this, if you're Toboni, why would you come here if you didn't like what you heard from ownership? And I find that maybe the most encouraging thing of all. If the Nats have reeled in a bright, young, rising executive in a guy like Toboni, who seems to be very well regarded, he must be attracted to this job. And it's not just about, the Washington, D.C. market or what the Nats have. It's also about who he's going to be working for. And so maybe, just maybe, there's some real reason for optimism here.
To piggyback off that, my thought is, here's somebody who at least was a leading candidate, if not even had the option to become the Red Sox GM. Again, not as the number one guy, but as the number two guy. And you would imagine somebody who would be up for other head of baseball operations openings around the league in the coming years, that if he was going to take this one now, it must have been awfully attractive to him. And we can speculate on what the reasons are, and I'll be interested to hear from himself what he says those reasons are. But I think what you outlined there has to be a part of it. We said throughout this process, whoever would end up getting the job, if you are interviewing for this and you have not worked for them before, you have to come in with a bunch of questions for them. And as much as you are selling yourself to the Lerner family was selling themselves to you as why you should want to come work for them. So I think it will be really interesting to hear what they say about that part of it. And then ultimately, they can say all they want, the proof's in the pudding. And Mark Lerner and his family can say that they're ready to dive back in and do things the right way and return to the way that they were from 2012 to 2019. But we need to see actions more than words. And that will be interesting. I do also look at this guy's background in scouting and player development, and I can see why that's appealing to a Lerner family, which really from the very beginning when they bought the franchise, Stan Kasten convinced them of the importance of that. Mike Rizzo convinced them of the importance of that. And it's something they've tried to prioritize. Now, haven't always done it very well. But as the rebuild began in 2021 and 2022, that was the focus. I'm curious to see if this is a sign of them saying that even if they are being more aggressive in spending money on major league players, and we don't know if that's going to be true or not, I would think at the very least, they're saying, hey, we still believe ultimately that scouting and drafting and player development is the number one way to build a winning franchise, even if that takes longer. And so I would guess that's an appealing part of Toboni's background there and why they may have been attracted to him as well. So we'll see. A lot of good, smart, young minds have come out of a handful of organizations over the years and gotten top jobs around baseball. Some of them have done very well. Some of them have not. It's not a guarantee that just because you worked for a good team and you come in with a good reputation, there's no guarantee that it works when you go somewhere else. It requires commitment from the owners you work for, and it just requires being right on a lot of things that sometimes you have control over and sometimes you don't. It's a massive undertaking. He's got a lot of stuff to do now. Once he is officially in the job, a lot of moves to make, a lot of front office decisions to make, a manager to hire, a coaching staff to hire. It's going to be fascinating to see. By the time we get to the end of October, and hopefully they've accomplished most of this stuff, it's going to be really fascinating to see who he brings in, who he retains, and if there's any overarching philosophy there, or do we really get a sense of what he is trying to build here, and is it in his vision?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, who he hires to round out the top of Nats baseball ops moving forward is going to be so interesting. An assistant GM type. Is there more than one assistant GM? We've already talked about Mike DiBartolo. Does he stick around? You talk about culture. We've brought that up a lot with the Nats. How is Paul Toboni when it comes to presiding over a proper culture, a culture of accountability, a culture of proper player development, that kind of a thing, a culture under which mistakes aren't as tolerated as they perhaps have been in recent years. But it does come back to the two things that have landed the Nats in this spot to begin with, drafting and player development, and that Paul Toboni has been a big part of a Red Sox baseball ops department that has done some really good work in drafting and player development. That maybe is as encouraging as anything. Like, this is a guy who gets it, has been a part of an enterprise that has done some really good work in the two areas that have been woeful for the Nats for years now. I mean, let's just be honest. But again, there's a reason he's being hired, right? Like, you have to look at, why is he being hired? Well, he's being hired primarily for these two things at which he has been good, or at least he's been part of an operation that has been good. And so I think that is encouraging. But yeah, I mean, what is he truly thinking? We'll maybe get a sense of that when he speaks at the intro presser. how quickly things move from here. Like, does the managerial hire come soon? Does that maybe take a few weeks? Like, does Toboni first want to build up his baseball ops department and then go manager and coaching staff? Does he maybe do both at the same time? So, like, there's just a lot that's up in the air here. But it is exciting. It's good to see the things that you read about Toboni, that he is well regarded. You know, if you think about like the boxes that I think most Nats fans wanted checked, right? Toboni is young. He is believed to be big on analytics, and he has this impressive background in drafting and player development. And those, to me, are three big boxes that we all would have wanted checked for whoever was going to run Nats baseball ops moving forward. And with Paul Toboni, it sure seems like you can check those three boxes.
Agreed. I'm a little surprised that it is maybe more on the scouting side than the analytics side. You know, a Mike DiBartolo, who certainly deserving of it and may still remain. Just real quick on that, what I had been told throughout this process was that clearly he was hoping to get the job, to be the number one guy. But if he did not get it, he was certainly open to staying and working with whoever would be brought in, depending on who it was and, you know, how the organizational structure would be. So it doesn't necessarily mean this is it for him with the team, but we don't know. We're going to have to see that. But so in Toboni's case, you know, not a straight up analytics, you know, didn't work on Wall Street previously. Yes, has an MBA, but also does have a baseball background. And that scouting and development, while using analytics in it, he's been out there in the small towns scouting kids himself as an area scout for several years at the beginning of his career a decade ago. So, you know, in a perfect world, that's a nice combination if you have both of those things. I think everybody acknowledges that you can't go totally one way or the other. They have to work in unison to ultimately, you know, produce the best possible players for your team and the right strategy for your team. You know, what I'm also interested in is, does he have his guys, whoever they are, that he already knows and works with and wants to bring in? I'm thinking about a lot of people in the Nats front office who I'm sure deep down were probably rooting for DiBartolo because it probably meant that they would be safe themselves to remain. Maybe a little bit nervous now, maybe also excited about the possibilities. But I would imagine that almost anyone who currently works for the team in baseball operations, in player development, all their minor league managers and coaches and trainers and other staffers, they all have to be wondering now, what does this mean for me? Is this a complete overhaul? Could they do a total overhaul that quickly? You know, that's a lot to do for a first-time brand new GM. So maybe by nature, they have to retain a lot and sort of spend a year evaluating it before they go and do other things. It's the good part of bringing somebody brand new is fresh ideas, somebody with a track record working for a winning organization. The downside is he doesn't know the Nationals at all, other than whatever he's seen from afar. And so there's going to be a learning curve for him to figure things out. As far as the timing now, you're talking about manager and all that. My sense was that in a perfect world, and again, you know, a lot of things can change, but so far this has worked out about the way they were hoping. They wanted to pick a GM sometime here right before or right after the season ended. So they did it before, maybe official announcement on Monday, perhaps the day after the season. And then probably spending the month of October filling out the top front office positions, interviewing managerial candidates, and ultimately hiring one. I think they probably were looking at like late October, maybe very beginning of November to hire a manager. And that's not unusual in any situation. Very often, that's the kind of thing that's done after the World Series. MLB doesn't like major announcements during the postseason. So sometimes there's a gap in days where there's no games and they try to do it. Sometimes they have to wait till after the World Series. So I would guess that there's going to be a lot being done in October. And the hope would be that by the end of October or within the first few days of November, they've got a front office, all the key positions. They've got a manager, and that manager is filling out a coaching staff.
Well, it is perhaps the single most important decision by the Lerner family regarding the Nationals since the Lerner family bought the Nats in 2006. Like, you think about every decision that the Lerners have made while owning this team regarding this team, I don't think there's been a bigger decision than this decision. It's going to take a while until we can say whether the right decision was made, but Paul Toboni has been chosen to run Nats baseball operations. Hey, as the end of the Nats season approaches, a salute to one of the great sponsors of the Nats Chat podcast, Window Nation. If you want new windows, if you need new windows, contact Window Nation. Tell Window Nation that Al Galdi from the Nats Chat podcast sent you. That helps out this podcast a lot, and that gets you a great deal on great Window Nation windows. In fact, now is the best time of year to get new windows. Whether you have old, drafty windows or cheap builder-grade windows, September is the perfect month to protect your home from cooler weather. And right now, Window Nation is offering its most popular offer: buy 2 replacement windows, get 2 for free. Plus, you won't pay any interest, pay any monthly payments, or pay any down payment for 2 years. 866-90-NATION or visit windownation.com and tell Window Nation that you want the deal that you heard about from Al Galdi on the Nats Chat podcast. With Window Nation, you get top quality windows from a trusted company, all at a reasonable price, because Window Nation knows that replacing windows is an investment, and Window Nation wants to make the investment affordable to you. And do not miss this great offer from Window Nation. For listeners of the Nats Chat podcast, the offer is good until September 30th. Buy 2 windows, get 2 free, and you pay nothing for 2 years. 866-90-NATION or windownation.com. That's 866-90-NATION or windownation.com. And tell Window Nation that Al Galdi from the Nats Chat podcast sent you.
The pitch swung on and drilled high in the air to left center. Harris gliding back, looking up. You can't forget it. A home run going the other way to left center field, and that's a long shot for James Wood, who's now homered in back-to-back ball games. Make it 3-0 Nationals.
So the Paul Toboni news broke as the Nationals on Wednesday afternoon were playing at the Atlanta Braves, trying to snap the Braves' 10-game winning streak, trying to avoid a 3-game sweep, and the Nats did come through a 4-3 win at the Braves as James Wood hit 2 home runs. He has gotten to 30 home runs. We had been wondering if he was going to do this. It was seeming increasingly unlikely that he would do this, but he did do this, and it's very nice to be able to say that. Just like that, Wood has gone from 27 homers to 30 homers. The Nats in this 4-3 win at the Braves on Wednesday afternoon, 4 runs, 9 hits, which were 3 homers, a double, and 5 singles. So the Nats worked no walks, went 2 for 5 with runners in scoring position. But James Wood is the Nats DH and number 1 batter, 2 for 4 with 2 solo homers, giving him 3 homers over the Nats' last 2 games. Wood in a Nats 1-run 6, a leadoff opposite field homer to left center field for a 3-0 Nats lead. The homer going a projected 445 feet per Statcast. Wood in a Nats 1-run 8th had a 1-out solo homer to center field for a 4-1 Nats lead. That homer went a projected 436 feet per Statcast. So consider this. James Wood now has 3 home runs over the Nats' last 2 games. This off him having hit just 3 home runs from July 10th through September 21st. That is remarkable when you think about that. But just like that, Wood for this regular season gets to 30 home runs. And, it's kind of unfortunate the Toboni news breaks on the day on which Wood hits 2 homers. We would have gone nuts with this James Wood hitting 2 homers thing on just about any other show. With this show, the news has to take a backseat to the hiring of Toboni. But man, James Wood gets to 30. Terrific to see that.
Yeah, 100%. And, hopefully he can keep it up over the final weekend and all of a sudden goes into the winter feeling a whole lot better about himself. You look, a couple days ago when they left New York, he has an OPS down to 806. And we're talking, is there a chance that he's going to end the season in the 700s after being up in the 950s at the All-Star break? And now, thanks to 3 home runs and a double, by the way, the other night as well, he's back up to 827. Big deal. Here's the other big deal, Al. He didn't strike out in the whole series. Now, he didn't play in the opener, but he didn't strike out on Tuesday night, and he didn't strike out on Wednesday afternoon. That's the first time he's gone back-to-back games without striking out since August 11th and 12th. Now, that's, number one, just a good sign of that the swing's in a much better place, and the decisions are in a much better place if he's not striking out. But while we thought a few days ago that Mark Reynolds record was almost a slam dunk, he was 8 away with 6 games to go. He's still 8 away with 3 games to go. You never say never, but that would be a pretty awful final series against the White Sox for him to strike out 3 times a game to now break that record. And so all of a sudden that he may have avoided that kind of infamous record setting in addition to hitting the ball for power again. It just is going to look so much nicer on the back of the baseball card to see 30 homers and an OPS well over 800, over 90 RBIs. Doesn't dismiss the struggles that he had over a long period of time, but it was nice to see that he did get it back, and hopefully he can continue it over the final weekend.
Well, a couple days ago, if I would have said what's more likely, Wood gets to 30 homers or Wood breaks the Mark Reynolds record, I think we all would have said Wood breaks the Mark Reynolds record. Now he has gotten to 30 homers, and as you just outlined, Wood may not be breaking that Mark Reynolds record. So quite the turnaround here in terms of the micro picture. Also for the Nats in this game, Dalen Lyle, another good game. You know, it's funny, Dalen Lyle a few days ago, we thought his season might be over with a knee injury. Here he is right back to raking. He is the Nats starting left fielder and cleanup batter, 3 for 4, RBI single, and 2 other singles. Mr. September, he now for this month of September has an OPS of 1,170. And a salute to Josh Bell. These, more likely than not, are his final days as a Washington National, but he did hit the Nats' other homer in this game. He is the Nats starting first baseman and number 3 batter, went 2 for 4 with a solo homer and a single. If you're not enthused by Bell doing well, I understand, but he gets to 21 home runs on the regular season, number 2 on the Nats in homers. He and the Nats 1-run fourth had a leadoff homer on a moonshot to center field for a 2-0 Nats lead. The homer going a projected 429 feet per StatCast. By the way, a lot of homers in this game, all of them 400 plus feet. 6 homers in this game, 3 by each team, and every one of them was an impressive shot. But I give credit to Josh Bell. 21 homers, OPS well above 700. He's winding down his season with some decent numbers, if not good numbers. And yeah, Dalen Lyle continues to just tear it up in this magical month of September for him.
Great to see that Lyle is fine and playing again and productive again. That was a huge scare, obviously, the other day. Great to see that. With Josh Bell, look, if we had said at the beginning of the season, he's going to hit you 21 homers with an OPS of 733 for $6 million, I think most people would have said, all right, that's not spectacular, but for Josh Bell at this point, at that price number, I think I'll take that. Now, the path to get there, of course, unfortunately, as is often the case with him, is not a straight line to get there. It was a huge dip at the beginning and then a big surge and then kind of few hits and misses along the way. But he did get there in the end. And I'm looking right now at his numbers since late May. He got finally hot May 28th in Seattle. And I know you can say, well, you can't do this because we know how streaky he is. We know how he's always a slow starter. But I think it's particularly important in this case because he didn't just get hot. He changed his whole philosophy on the fly at that point after trying to hit the ball in the air more, trying to hit for more power and having it not work. He just decided, I'm just going to try to hit the ball hard. Again, go back to my old swing. Well, it's now 92 games since then, and he's hit 15 homers with 47 RBI. And I don't have the exact OPS because I haven't had time to calculate it, but it's probably about 820 or so on the OPS. And that's over more than half a season. And we know he hasn't played every day. That's basically 4 months of a season. I'm not saying that you can guarantee that he would do that over an entire year because we know how streaky he often is. But the fact that he did kind of have this epiphany of, I'm going back to my old swing, I'm going to take my old approach, and had pretty good success, all things considered, with that, it leads me to believe that he can continue this to some extent, can still be a productive big league hitter. Whether that fits into the Nationals' plan under a new GM, who knows? But I wouldn't completely rule that out as no chance, no even thought about bringing him back. Under the right circumstances, I could buy an argument for it. I think ultimately there is some value there in him, whether it's with the Nationals or with somebody else.
He seems to be a really good guy, too, and there's something to be said for that. Like, you like to see good things happen to good people. The shame of it, though, is that he didn't do this enough before the trade deadline, because that's what would have really helped this team. If he would have gotten hot sooner, they could have traded him. So much of the production has come post the trade deadline, post the firings of Mike Rizzo and Davey Martinez, post the waving of the white flag on this season. So, you know, you could say that he's doing a lot of this in garbage time regarding this Nats season, and that's the shame of it. But yes, he has very much righted his season, and for that, he deserves credit.
100%. And the other point there is, had he done this in April and May and then finished off with an awful August and September, it could have changed the whole complexion of the team's season. Now, for better or worse, who knows where they would have gone from there. But absolutely, his lack of production those first 2 months played a major role in the team struggling to that extent and ultimately making the changes that they did. Walters is the spot to be to watch college football this Friday night as undefeated Florida State takes on Virginia at 7 p.m. Walters is the official DC bar for Florida State football. On Saturday, Walters will have all the big games, including Oregon at Penn State at 7:30 p.m. Walters has plenty of TVs both inside and outside.
3-2, swung on, chopped on the ground right side, charging in Garcia, tough play, shovels with the gloves, safe at first. Now the Nationals will probably challenge the play. Yeah, they will. As Garcia came in on a slow chopper, gloved it, made a glove flip to Chaparro, and Baldwin running hard.
Out, game is over.
And there you have it, a Curly W in the books. Thank you, Dan Iasonia. Jose Ferrer gets the second ground ball, and this time the out at first. And the Nationals hold on for a one-run victory here in Atlanta in their final road game of the year.
The Nats starting pitcher in this 4-3 win at the Braves on Wednesday afternoon, Andrew Alvarez. Presumably, this was his last appearance this season. You know, things can get kind of weird in the final series of a season. Starters can get used as relievers, so I guess we'll see if Alvarez is in fact done. But assuming he's done, man, did he end up doing some really good work for a guy who was taken in the 12th round of the 2021 MLB draft. So Alvarez on Wednesday afternoon, 4 1/3 scoreless innings with 5 strikeouts. He gave up just 2 hits, both of which were singles. Now, he did issue 3 walks in a wild pitch. He did throw a ton of balls, 83 pitches, just 42 strikes, 41 balls. So an odd outing, a lot of balls, and yet he had 5 strikeouts in 4 1/3 shutout innings. But look, let's bottom line this. So the Nats on Labor Day Monday morning, September 1st, announced having selected the contract of Alvarez from AAA Rochester. Here's what he did for the Nats at the major league level here. 5 starts, ERA of 2.31, whip of 1.11. Again, a rookie who was taken in the 12th round of the 2021 MLB draft. Good work by Andrew Alvarez, and if this in fact was the end of his season, an overall nice way for him to end his season.
Yeah, absolutely. And what does this mean that he is down the road? I don't know that answer. I would just say I think he certainly showed enough here to suggest that he deserves a real look next spring to maybe be a part of this. We've talked about before, we've been fooled by some September performances from pitchers in particular in the past, and especially a guy who doesn't have the track record or the pedigree that others do. You are somewhat concerned about, the walks, the lack of strikeouts. Although he struck out 5 in this game. He actually had better stuff, I would say, in this game than some of the previous ones. But over time, would he be able to sustain that level? I don't know. I also thought it was interesting. They really limited him to facing a lineup twice and not doing more than that. I would have loved to see him stay in this game and face the top of that lineup there to try to get through the 5th inning. It was at 83 pitches at that point. I understand the thought process of not doing it, but it's also like at some point, don't you need to find out if this kid has that in him or not? And it's a quote unquote meaningless game against 2 teams out of the race here in the final week of the season. I would have liked it. It worked out, of course. I was very surprised that Mitchell Parker was the first guy out of the bullpen in that spot just 3 days after his long relief appearance in New York, but it did work out. So you can't complain about the results, but I almost feel like I might have a little better window into Andrew Alvarez's future if he did get the opportunity to try to finish that 5th inning. Right now, there's a lot to like, but I also feel like it's a pretty incomplete picture, and I don't want to get too excited about what we saw because it was managed very carefully, and it's only September, and a guy who wasn't tearing it up at the AAA level prior to the move. So I don't really know what to make of him or what to think of him in the long run yet.
Yeah, at the very least, though, he has made himself part of the conversation with what he did over these 5 starts. The Nats relief pitching in this 4-3 win at the Braves on Wednesday afternoon. Not good. Continuing a decline for the bullpen in recent weeks off the surge of the previous few weeks. 5 Nats relievers combined to allow 3 runs in 4 2/3 innings on 3 homers. Mark mentioned Mitchell Parker, 2/3 of a scoreless and hitless inning. Bottom of the 5th, he faced 3 batters, got 2 outs. Julian Fernandez allowed 1 run in 1 inning. Bottom of the 6th, he gave up a leadoff homer by Drake Baldwin to right center field to cut the Nats' lead to 3-1. Clayton Beeter, scoreless and hitless, bottom of the 7th with 3 swinging strikeouts, despite issuing a walk to each of the first 2 Braves batters in the inning and then issuing a wild pitch. Jackson Rutledge allowed 1 run in 1 inning. Bottom of the 8th, he gave up a 1-out opposite field solo homer by Marcell Ozuna to right center to cut the Nats' lead to 4-2. And Jose A. Ferrer, 1 run in 1 inning, did get the save, but bottom of the 9th, he gave up a pinch leadoff first pitch home run by Eli White to center field to cut the Nats' lead to 4-3. Ferrer did then retire 3 of the next 4 batters, including generating 2 swinging strikeouts. We have seen Ferrer come back down to earth a bit here lately. There's still a lot to like. He's still pumping out strikeouts at a very high rate, so that is good. But look, I guess it was bound to happen. I mean, he wasn't going to be, pitching at this A++ level the rest of the way. But yeah, the Nats bullpen in this game, not so good. 3 home runs given up. The Nats for this regular season, dead last in MLB in relief pitching ERA, 5.61. Dead last in MLB in relief pitching WHIP, 1.53. And the bullpen among the many things to be addressed by Paul Toboni in the coming months.
Sure. A lot of this has just been trying to figure out who could be a part of it and who doesn't look like they should be a part of it. Ferrer obviously is going to be a part of it. We'll see if he's really viewed as the guy, your number 1 reliever or not. A little concerned about this late season slide from him. He had been essentially perfect since taking over for Kyle Finnegan. So you knew that wasn't going to be the case forever, but you hope, and this was always the case with Finnegan as well, that if they do have a bad one, that they brush it off pretty quickly, come right back and are good again, as opposed to going through a lengthier slide of a week or 2. And we are kind of seeing that with Ferrer. I'm sure the state of his arm right now probably isn't that great. He's been worked very hard here down the stretch, so I'm not surprised necessarily by that. And Clayton Beeter, was that not the full Clayton Beeter experience or what in that inning? 2 walks, a wild pitch, but 3 strikeouts. When you have that swing and miss stuff, you can get away with it. You can get out of those jams. He doesn't get beat by hits very often. It is the walk more than anything. He also was squeezed by Tyler Jones, the home plate umpire. A bunch of guys he felt like he got it worse than anyone else. That was a crazy day behind the plate, and a crazy day by C.B. Buckner at first base, who was 0 for 2 on the final 2 plays of the game, by the way. They corrected him and got the final one right. Otherwise, the Nats might not have won the game. But with Beeter, you love the stuff. You love the ability to get out of those jams. Boy, you just wish he threw strikes a little more consistently to not put himself in those kind of positions. There wasn't a batted ball in play against him. All walks and strikeouts. I get that can work, but boy, it does cause some heart attacks.
Yeah, and you don't want relievers issuing walks. That's not a recipe for success, as we have come to know quite well. Well, no game for the Nats on Thursday. Next up for them is their final series of the season, a 3-game series against the American League worst Chicago White Sox at Nationals Park. Game 1, Friday evening at 6:45. Cade Cavalli will be the Nats starting pitcher. Game 2, Saturday afternoon at 4:05. Jake Irvin will be the Nats starting pitcher. And Game 3, Sunday afternoon at 3:05. The Nats starting pitcher is to be announced. Paul Toboni has been chosen to run Nats baseball operations. Hit us up on X at Nats_chat. Hit us up on Blue Sky at Nats Chat Podcast. You can email us natschatpodcast@gmail.com. This installment of Nats Chat brought to us by Mason Kalfas, the top legal recruiter in Washington, D.C. Mason has been with us since our first season. You can reach him at 202-486-3535. Also, you on Apple Podcasts and on Spotify can both rate this podcast and write reviews. 5-star ratings are very much appreciated. A positive review, just like 1 or 2 sentences, very much appreciated. Thank you very much for doing these things. They help us out a lot. All Nationals radio highlights on Nats Chat, courtesy of 106.7 The Fan. For Mark Zuckerman, I'm Al Galdi. We thank you for listening, and we'll talk to you next time on the Nats Chat Podcast.
20 home runs for Bell, his 5th career 20 home run season. It's on the way to him. Swinging a high drive to center field, chasing Harris back. He's on the run, back of the track, looking up, and there's home run number 21 for Bell. He rockets it out of here to center field, and the Nationals take a 2-0 lead.